Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have a brand new guest. Also, I have a brand new guest host, Sri Vibhuti Jha. Sri Vibhuti Jha is going to be hosting us today in place of me, and he's going to be talking to Professor Asra Nomani. And she is a writer. She has written a famous book called The Woke Army, and she is a fellow Hyderabadi. And now I would like to introduce you to our two guests, one guest host, Vibhuti Jha. Vibhuti ji, namaskar. How are you?
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. Pleasure and honor to be your co-host on P Gurus.
Sir, you are the host, sir. I'm just going to sit and watch this whole thing. It's a fascinating conversation because we've been having a little bit of prelude to that, and I'm really, my appetite is completely whetted up. So allow me, actually, I would like you to introduce Asra Nomani ji so that, from this point on, the baton goes over to you, sir. Over to you.
Viewers of P Gurus and worldwide, Asra Nomani ji doesn't need introduction. She has come with us on Jaipur Dialogues, and I said, just Google her, and you will get so much material that these 45 minutes to an hour of conversation will not do justice, nor will it suffice in talking about her accomplishments and her work that she is doing single-handedly, collectively, and taking the institutional support. So, Asra ji, you are welcome to the show. Suffice to say,
Thank
that
you.
you have been a frontline warrior in women's rights, exposing the woke army, the Red Army, and this book of yours is an amazing book, and I will ask each of the viewers to look it up. Not only look it up, but read it. Give a review. Tell us what you think about it, because this is based on experience, a hardline experience on the battlefield, in the front line, interacting with people, viewing the scenarios, and talking about elements that we have perhaps not heard before. So, Ashradi, welcome to the show. Let's talk about the book. You have not written this book alone, because you have written many more books. And as you shared just now, you also gave the history of why you did a book called Tantrika. So this is a very interesting insight into your personality. So let's begin wherever you choose to begin from.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to speak with you again and to just be speaking to this new audience. I'm so happy to be connected with my sisters and brothers in India and in the Indian diaspora, because we have a major responsibility. We are in a new war, and this war is against this network that I call the woke army. I am not being hyperbolic in saying this, because I know right now the machine, there's a really machine that is against India right now. And I could never have even imagined that we would come to this point, but we are here. And I am honored to speak with you about this journey. For me, I could never have imagined it when I arrived in the United States at the age of 4, that the nation of my birth would become a target on in the scopes of activists and governments around the world. But as you know, India is about to soon become the world's largest population. It is soon to become the world's largest population of Muslims in any nation. And as we all know, it carries this great responsibility of being the world's largest democracy. And so that was the India into which I was born, and the India that I left when I was just 4 years old to come to the United States to become a journalist, and then now an activist, writer. I really am inspired by my ancestors from India. My dadi was named Zubeda Nomani. My dada was attorney in the city of Hyderabad for the freedom fighters. My nani was a single mother after her husband, my nana, was killed at a young age. And I believe that in each one of us, wherever we are, from our roots in India, we have inherited a great spirit, and we also carry a great responsibility. And that's what I want to talk to everybody about, how I found my own purpose and what I think our purpose is for the world.
You used a fascinating word called responsibility. And I personally believe in our work in turnaround strategy. We always say that unless you own up the responsibility for what you do and what happens to you, you will never change. Because change begins from there. So I can see the signs of why you changed. And I have seen your fascinating career develop. In this book, Woke Army and the Red Army that you have talked about, there's a very unholy alliance of these two groups of people who have virtually become the ownership, have become the owners of various narratives. And as I was going through the book, you have given an excellent breakdown, chapter-wise, to tell the various issues. But the one which attracted me a lot, in addition to others, was your chapter on facing a woke army. Now, this question, I would just preface it by saying one more little thing here. It is remarkably relevant for us Indians, the Indian diaspora here, and particularly where P. Guru operates from, Sri Ayerji operates from in San Francisco Valley, Silicon Valley. The entire community there stays woke. They vote Democratic Party, they vote woke candidates. Share your thoughts about that. How did this ownership of CRT, pushing Islamophobia agenda, you use the word white passing, tell us something about it, because how does this entire idea shapes up in the thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So, my life story is this journey, because I was born in 1965. I came to the US in 1969. I'm born into a Muslim family. I am Muslim from Uttar Pradesh. From our village goes back to village of Jagha in not far from Varanasi, and then from the village of Bindwal near Azamgarh. So I have this fusion of identities, because I also learned that 14 generations ago, our family was Hindu, like many Muslim families were. And our conversion happened when two brothers converted through Sufi Islam to become Muslim. So that was the identity in which I grew up, an identity that then fused with America, in which, my father had climbed a banyan tree to support Gandhi when he went on the Salt March, and then he marched with him also. My mother, she became the first businesswoman in our family here in the United States, running a boutique in my hometown of Morgantown, West Virginia. We had this fusion of identity that then catapulted into American society with a new expression, right? I became a journalist, my mother a businesswoman, my brother pursued soccer in this country. We enjoyed so many freedoms in the United States just with this simple concept of equal opportunity. I ended up becoming a reporter for the Wall Street Journal at the age of 23, even though I had not known a word of English when I had arrived 19 years earlier. So this is what America represented. And, this will be really interesting to folks, that I grew up very much what we call a West Virginia Democrat. I was very much supporting labor unions, because labor unions would fight the coal companies, to make sure that workers got fundamental rights. And it was, I thought, a value system that matched with everything that our family had been able to become in the US through equal rights, through women's rights, through even human rights, because equality is a human rights issue.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a great shock. I'll tell you, the shock that came to me was 9/11, of course, happened, and I all of a sudden confronted a collision, right, between the extremists within my Muslim community and my own upbringing, which had been a real expression of Islam that was pluralistic and was an expression of grace. Well, that was my first collision. And then the second one happened when my dear friend from the Wall Street Journal was a journalist, Daniel Pearl, who was kidnapped and then murdered. He had left a home that I had rented in Karachi, Pakistan. And many of the viewers will know the story that it was this man named Omar Sheikh that laid the plot for Danny's kidnapping. He had been released on December 31st, 1999, in exchange for the passengers of the Indian Airlines jet that had been hijacked from Kathmandu. So all of a sudden, my life had new meaning and purpose because Danny was murdered because of his identity. He was murdered because he was Jewish, he was American, he was of Israeli ancestry. So what ended up happening for me is I ended up becoming a reformer in my Muslim faith, a Muslim reformer who challenges ideas of talaq as a permissible way for men to divorce women just by saying, I divorce you 3 times. I challenged the idea that a woman cannot go into a mosque because I had seen actually in the mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, I had been able to walk in, ironically, freely with my father. But then, what happened for me, just to explain to folks how this woke army became a reality for me, is that all of a sudden I discovered that I went from hero to zero in the traditional circles of liberal America. I was always a classic liberal, but all of a sudden I was called things like Islamophobe and racist. And what I learned and what I chronicle in the book is that there was an establishment Muslim network that had used the strategy of race in order to create a shield for themselves on the extremism of their ideas. And this is something that I think people will see expressing itself again and again now with Hindus in the target and with India in the target. And so this machine that I call the woke army ended up becoming the Islamists, or the Muslims who believe in political Islam, and the far left in the United States. And now we can see in the world, so that India is in its crosshairs.
Oh my God, it's such a brilliant explanation to the whole scenario that you talk about here. But tell us about, because I read your book, and because I like those, in a small paragraphs, in small subsections, you have broken the stories down to explain why the thought process came about. So I was struck by the words like white passing, bridge initiative, how, they took the intersectionalizing of the anti-blackness and Islam. So this is what I want people to understand, because this shows one thing. As the famous song says, how deep is your love? You realize that how deep is their hate towards everything which is not that. So tell us about those anecdotes and stories that formed that entire theorizing of the bridge initiatives and, adopting CRT as the victimhood.
Yeah. So what happens, I'm going to give you guys an example that has nothing to do with India so that you can see how it's applied to other communities. So in 2016, as everybody knows, a man by the name of Donald Trump was elected president. That night of the election, there was a man, he's a lawyer, and he is a CNN host or CNN analyst. So he goes on and he says that the vote for Donald Trump was something that he called a white lash, which means like a backlash, but a white lash of white people white racists was really his point, voting for Donald Trump. Well, that's one element, okay? Then on the West Coast, there was a man who heads this organization called the Council on American Islamic Relations, and its Los Angeles chapter. And he spoke up and he said, he chanted a chant that was declared at Tahrir Square to bring down Hosni Mubarak. And he called for a revolution to bring down Donald Trump. So what we have is the far left and the Islamic establishment united. And then in New York City, an activist by the name of Linda Sarsour ends up calling people to New York City and the streets to launch a resistance to Donald Trump. Well, that resistance ends up morphing into this thing that's called the Women's March. And the Women's March was not just about women. It was about women opposed to Donald Trump. It was a political march. And they started raising millions of dollars. And women who opposed Donald Trump emerged. And among those women were Israeli feminists, Jewish feminists who believe in the state of Israel. So Linda Sarsour is a part of this woke army. She was a key lieutenant in creating this nexus, and they precisely used the word of intersectionality in order to talk about how there was a new hierarchy of oppression, that a transgender Black woman was more oppressed than a straight white woman, or a little bit more oppressed than a Muslim, woman who wears a headscarf. But down at the bottom was the Jewish woman who believes in the state of Israel. So they created a new hierarchy of human value among people. And ironically, these are the same people who are weaponizing the word caste in order to take a hit on Hindus. So they were creating their own caste system within their activist universe. And what they actually did then was ban Jewish women who believe in the state of Israel from attending the march, because Linda Sarsour is a Muslim activist of Palestinian ancestry who wants to destroy the state of Israel. And so in their new hierarchy of human value, there were those that were in the in group and the out group. And if anyone ever watched the movie Mean Girls, this was Mean Girls, like on steroids, because they were saying, oh, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. And that's not a human rights movement. That's not a civil rights movement. That's not a women's rights movement. You don't have a litmus test on who gets rights and who doesn't. But that was the beginning. That was when I really saw clearly how the Islamists and the far left had come together in this new network called the Woke Army.
It's so fascinating to hear these nuggets and the truth that people don't know by and large. It's a remarkable thing. And you mentioned the word transgender right now, and that's a conversation of the day, so it seems, because you had tragic shooting of children in the school by a transgender person. Reuters reported that a Christian woman was doing this, Christian person was doing it for the first ever time. The person who committed the shooting was identified as a person. But there was a very strong video. These days, we live in an era of tectonic shift brought by technology. Things travel. My phrase is that news travels faster than the speed of lightning. So there was a video in which an athlete in Kentucky was talking about how humiliated and how badly she was treated because a transgender was allowed to compete with women. And my question here is, how is this society tolerating such injustice against young ladies who are sportswomen and allowing males who rank 400th in the swimming competition amongst male, and they become gold medal winners as transgender participating in women. How has the United States become such unfavored treatment to women, unequal treatment to women?
Yeah, this is the phenomena of this new hierarchy of human value. And I'm just so happy always to talk to my Indian community about this issue, because I journeyed, as a Muslim into temples through India for my reporting on this book on Tantra. I was exploring the spirituality, and I was exploring some of these spiritual concepts of, non-duality and transcendence, fundamental ideas of like how it is that we separate ourselves from our bodies and our egos in order to reach this higher spiritual place. So I'm just prefacing my answer to you with that spiritual context, because I think it's so important to realize how devoid this woke army is of actual spiritual, uh, valor or integrity. It is, in fact, so dehumanizing. And this is what has happened, is that we all know, and I, as a Muslim, have fought against the criminalization of people within the LGBTQ community. There's called the lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender community. And now they have many other descriptions, but that captures the essence of it. As a girl, I have stood so strong when I would come back to India against any kind of abuse or dehumanizing that we have had in our communities against those that are transgender. We know that this is a reality where people don't understand other folks of difference, and they have insensitivity. But we have come to a new place in our world, I believe, in which we recognize that adults can make adult choices, and whatever your moral decision, we cannot criminalize them, punish them, kill them. In my Muslim majority countries, I fought against these sex laws that throw men off of rooftops as punishment for homosexuality. So in that context, I just want to say, of course, we had to make things more just. Same issue. We don't have to explain it. Our ancestors lived under so-called white supremacy, under British rule. We know that there has been injustice based on race, based on sexuality, based on gender. And our goal in life, I believe, is that we move towards a place of progress, of equality and justice. But what's happened, unfortunately, is that, again, in this new topsy-turvy world, in this new hierarchy of human value, people who are transgender now are above people who are heterosexual. And thus, what has happened in society today is that we have lost our moral compass with organizations like the NCAA and so many professional sports, where women and girls are being denied their fundamental rights and for equality, because in the spirit of virtue signaling and political correctness and the politics of the woke army, people have to deny them their rights in order to give transgender athletes and others their more rights. And so I have here that swimmer is a young woman by the name of Riley, and this was a poster that we carried. She was at this event also, called "Our Bodies, Our Sports: Keep Women's Sports Female." Why does this matter? Because women, as everybody knows, women have been treated like second-class citizens through the history of time. It was in the United States that I was able to enjoy a simple freedom. And that was running the hills of my hometown of Morgantown, West Virginia, with the wind in my hair and my legs in full stride, attacking the hills, coming down the downhills, realizing my power, my stride. And sports is a way for girls and women to become more powerful in both their bodies and in their spirits. Of course, it makes you healthier. It adds years to your life. And anybody who has played sports understands that power. So when you deny women equality in sports, you're denying them equality in the world. What does that mean? That means that the young women and the athletes, they don't get as many endorsements. They don't win prizes. And in the case that you cited, they actually are denied their rewards. The Riley was tied with the transgender athlete who was a biological male who said that he was a female and thus was allowed to compete in women's swimming. And when she tied him, then the NCAA and gave him the award. And I use him to describe the transgender athlete. What has happened is words have been weaponized also, so that if you use the wrong pronoun, you are now called transphobic. If you deny somebody, the access to the restroom, you're told that you're transphobic. And if people wonder how this is trickling down, this is one book that I picked up called Bye Bye Binary. And in this book, they are going through the politics of how a boy is not a boy and a girl is not a girl, but in fact, a being who gets to choose which gender they are. And of course, like for adults, we grant everybody the freedom to make any choice that they want. But what has happened is there's been an assault now on children. And that's where this woke army has just gone too far, and even for me as a classic liberal and as a mother, I know they are just laying claim to innocent children and denying them every fundamental freedom from, sports, to even now the freedom to just grow as they should grow in their bodies and then decide later as adults what they want to be in life. And so that's really what's at stake here.
For the viewers, must know that Asra Nomani ji has been on the forefront of education issues. And she has been on Fox, MSNBC, CNN, everywhere, talking about the equality of opportunity and the misapplication of the word equity. Asra ji, please do tell us about that, your significant initiatives that you shared with us on Jaipur Dialogue. The audience in the West Coast and everywhere needs to know this more and more. So please do share the thought on equity, equality, and how the school curriculum is being changed, much to the disappointment or shock to parents. They don't even know what's happening. As you showed last time, T stands for trans.
Right.
So the alphabet soup is also changing. Friends, please tell us, Astradi, about that experience of yours.
This is this book that you were referencing, Gay BCs, and it's no longer the A is for apple, B is for bicycle, T is for train. This is the example. I is not for ice cream anymore. It's for a word that even most adults will not understand called intersex.
Oops.
Yeah. It's a word that most people won't even understand. And then just like you said, T is not for train anymore, but for trans. And everybody has to see that these are the books, the innocent books that are meant for little babies. This is not flimsy paper so that it doesn't tear under their clumsy hands. And sexuality is one front, race is the other, just like you said. There's this book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And what it did is back in the 70s, it established that there was this idea of the oppressed and the oppressors. And then that idea was captured by this book called Critical Race Theory. And this book has become the Bible for the woke army. In this book, the notion is that race defines everything in society. And if there is any inequality of outcome, as they put it is because of racial discrimination. So let me make this real for everybody, is that my family came here, as I told you, with dollars in my father's pocket. We worked at a flea market in New Jersey to sell the kurtas that my family was making back in Lucknow, the ones with Lucknowi chicken. And we sold it for $7 a kurta long before the Gap used to now sells it in their store. Yeah.
Yes.
It was entrepreneurial spirit that then allowed us to save. My mother was so proud, when she got our first house on Cottonwood Street in Morgantown. And we would sit on the balcony and gaze at the mountains. And, this was our first property in the US, right? We had no legacy. We have no legacy as immigrants in the United States. We have no property. We have no bank account. We have no legacy admissions to some Ivy League school, right? We have nothing. And so there we sat in this 3-bedroom split level home on the balcony and drinking my mom's chai. And we would gaze at those mountains, and the motto of my native state of West Virginia is mountaineers are always free. So, yeah, free to realize opportunity, to realize their dreams. But then fast forward, I have a baby, and my little baby is growing up. He loves Legos, and I become his little Lego coach. I coached his boys volleyball team because I raised him challenging many traditions within our community. I raised him as a single mother. His father had abandoned us, and I didn't want my son to be a statistic, right? So I worked through the night, always 2-3 jobs, so that I could also be a stay-at-home mom and pick him up from school, take him to school. It was not easy living in Northern Virginia, one of the most expensive counties in the country. But I did it because of schooling, for his education. And my dad moved in with us middle school years in order to help me get my son up in the morning. And he would cook nice Hyderabadi dishes at night for us. His biryani was always too spicy. It was so beautiful. And I'm just telling you this story because this was our life, right? This was our experience. But on June 7th, 2020, I got a shock. My son had been accepted into our #1 high school in the United States. It's called Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. He was just a freshman when he arrived, of course, like most students, and it was so difficult a school. But then after the George Floyd killing, something changed. All of a sudden, our students at our school were not the right kind of minority for the administrators. And what kind of minority are we and were we? Asians. We were mostly Asian students in our school. 7 out of 10 of the students are Asian. 2 out of 10 are white, but many of them are from Eastern Europe, not just, inherited stories in the US. And then 1 out of 10 was Black and Hispanic and multiracial. Well, we got a message. It's exactly like what you were saying earlier, that we needed to check our privileges. And what I learned was that we were now being judged by a new standard. And because our kids dared to achieve in the United States, because we dared to accomplish academically, we were considered white passing or white adjacent, or that we had internalized whiteness. And what did they do then? they ended up changing the admissions to the school, eliminating the merit test, bringing in a virtual popularity contest where they socially engineered the data so that they would get the minority that they wanted. And we filed a lawsuit with an organization called Pacific Legal Foundation. And I want everybody to know how remarkable this is. We won. We won a federal judge's decision who ruled that, in fact, this admissions policy is anti-Asian, it's racist, and it's discriminatory. But this is what everybody must pay attention to. The school board is fighting that decision. In the name of equity, they want to be able to put in place a unconstitutional system, a discriminatory system, and a racist system. They did this in the 1950s when they were challenging Brown versus Board of Education that allowed Black children to come into the schools. And now they're doing it again. Asians are the new target of this new racism. And I think everybody has to pay attention to this because they are coming for the Asian community. This woke army is coming for the Asian community from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Anywhere where Asian community members are succeeding, they are coming after you. And they are going to use race and this new hierarchy of human value to shame you, to marginalize you, and to smear you. And the best example that I think my brothers and sisters in the Hindu community can see is that they are weaponizing the word caste in order to now make Hindus look like they are racist, bigoted, prejudicial people. And the lesson that I want to just share with you all is you must be unapologetic in your identity and in your values. You are not people who believe in a hierarchy of human value, and you want equality for all people. Do not allow anyone to shame you, and do everything that you can within yourself in your meditation to overcome any fear that you have about challenging authority in the United States or in the world. Because not only does your child's future and your grandchild's future and your future depend on your response and your actualizing the responsibility that you've got, but the future of the world. Because if this new ideology is allowed to prevail, it will create a new hierarchy of human value in the world that is unjust, inhumane, and unequal. And anybody of good conscience must stand up against it.
That's so sensational. What you said about the battle between the words of equity and equality. As a banker, I understand equity, I understand equality.
Right.
I also know that not all money earns you the same rates of interest. So it depends on when you invest, where you invest, how you invest. But a quick inquiry with you: did your son get the scholarship eventually or not?
Well, my son ended up staying at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And the scholarship that I think that you're thinking about is that this admissions battle for admissions was just the first frontier. And that's what I hope everybody will understand about the caste type of bills that are being introduced in various legislatures. There's a long war. And what happened in my son's school is that first they came after admissions. And then, you will not believe this, they came after salsa dancing. Yeah, you might wonder how, right? So every year the children have a thing called I Night, International Night. And the kids love to do all the dances of various countries around the world. One of the activist alumni who pushes for equity told these kids in a lesson that was brought into the school called social emotional learning, one of the Trojan horses through which the indoctrination is happening. He told them that if they engaged in salsa dancing, the mostly Asian kids, they would be engaging in cultural appropriation. And they won't even allow children to have fun. And so that was one angle. Then what they did is they came after, I didn't even know that this was happening, but what happens every year in the United States is the kids in their junior year take something called the PSAT, and that qualifies them for awards called the National Merit Scholarship Corporation Awards. So this past year, we learned through an amazing mother named Shauna Yasher that the kids didn't get their National Merit Commended Student Awards in time to put them in their admissions packages for early admissions. And guess what? I learned then 2 years after my son graduated that my son had gotten that award 2 years ago, but the school never told us. The school never told us because there is a war on merit. There is a war on meritocracy. Everything that I was sharing with you earlier about, selling kurtas, my mother babysat, every bit of hard work that we move forward to then sit on the balcony and enjoy the mountain view, that was because of the opportunities, equal opportunities provided in this nation. And now what they are doing is they are imposing a strategy that's called equal outcomes. Equity is a strategy of equal outcomes. And unfortunately, guess what? One of the ideologues of this thing called critical race theory, a man by the name of Ibram X. Kendi, he says the remedy for current discrimination is new discrimination. The remedy for past discrimination is current discrimination. So can you imagine that that's the United States of America? And that's exactly the philosophy of this woke army. Socialism, the far left, has this fake equality that they're now calling equity. And it really is a racism. And what is it that the Muslim establishment is doing? They are using race in order to further their agenda, to stop criticism of their governments, and the injustices that they practice against our own diaspora from India. And they are a serious ideological and also strategic threat to nations from the United States to India.
Friends, those who are watching this show, I have the housekeeping announcement to make. Please like, subscribe, support, and share the news and the views that we bring to you here. And selfishly speaking, what we do on Jaipur Dialogue and Jaipur Dialogue USA, like, subscribe. We need to be encouraged with your support, so do so. But one final question that I wanted to come to you, Asraji, about this one is, it's very interesting that you wrote a chapter on recognizing the new field marshals.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant chapter again, because from care, which doesn't care for anybody other than what is their agenda, to this new field marshals of Rashida Tlaib, Ilan Omar, AOC, Ro Khanna, all of them are almost always Democrats.
Yeah.
This is something, I'm a Republican. I contested New York State Assembly seat as a Republican, lost very narrowly in a remarkably blue district. That's not the story of the day. But tell us something about these new field marshals, as you very aptly say, who are carrying the baton and the fight, and spreading the message.
Yeah, this is such a disappointment to me because like I mentioned before, have traditionally voted as a Democrat. I have always considered myself a classic liberal, but it was during the administration of Barack Obama that I was able to see the penetration of the Islamists, or those Muslims who believe in political Islam, into the Democratic Party. And everybody today needs to pay attention to how it happened, because it is now continuing, and it just has a new target, which is Indians and Hindus. And so I will just explain real quickly that the woke army, what I do is I show that these Muslim establishment organizations, they started right here, not far from me in Northern Virginia, in a place called 500 Grove Street. That's literally where the building is that houses this alphabet soup of their organizations. What happened is they realized they had a little public relations problem after the 9/11 attacks. And so they started using critical race theory in order to say, you're racist if you criticize Islamic extremism or political Islam. And so they ended up getting a lot of grants. And these are grants that I document in the book with organizations with names like the Open Society Foundation and Proteus Fund, sorry. What are those? Those are funded by this billionaire named George Soros. And George Soros has single-handedly been able to pump millions and millions of dollars into the Democratic Party and its organizations. So I'm just reading here. One of the outgrowths is this new initiative that you referenced earlier called the Bridge Initiative. I just got their email today, and I'm going to just read from it. This is their Today in Islamophobia alert. And what they do is they put into the headlines and promote all of the stories that are trying to push their agenda. And what story do they promote today? Has Modi pushed Indian democracy past its breaking point? Recommended read. Fragile calm prevails in Indian states after days of religious clashes. So what's going on here? These are the Islamists funded by these organizations at this address called 500 Grove Street, funded by Islamist governments like Qatar, Turkey, traditionally Saudi Arabia also. And what are they doing now? They created a beachhead at Georgetown University. Their Bridge Initiative has this lovely email address of georgetown.edu. And Georgetown is where I taught journalism as a professor. So it's really disheartening to me that they have done this at Georgetown. But Georgetown gets money. They get money for this machine to put this character assassination out against India and Hindus. And who is it that then promotes their ideas in the halls of Congress and in state houses? That unfortunately these Democratic leaders. So that you then had Ilhan Omar, a democratically elected representative from Minnesota, declaring what? That there was now a Nazification of India. So this is the way, this is the machine. And I just want everyone to recognize that this isn't something that happened yesterday. It's been building for many years now. And the only way that you're going to be able to fight it and fight this larger assault on children and on people's identities and their futures is by being fearless, by channeling, for me, my inner Durga. That's how I meditate. And yeah, and I do not believe that this is a moment in which people must, just try to disappear into the wallpaper, as they say. That people have to step forward in whichever way that you can, whether it is through support of channels like this one, support of these conversations in the smallest way possible. If you even share this conversation with 3 people, that's contribution, and then if however you can raise your voice, it's critical. And what I hope to do with the book Woke Army is I wanted to walk you through every single step. My father has read every page so slowly because he wanted to understand something that he couldn't even fully comprehend living it with me. But now, he says himself, best recommendation I can get is that everybody should read this book in order to really see the long war that we're in, and so that we can win it.
Asra, I'm grateful to you for coming today. I'm honored to host you on P Gurus. I'm honored and delighted to call you a friend, even if you agree or don't agree. I don't care. I'm calling you my friend. And, coming on Jaipur Dialogue, we will need this conversation more and more, and people need to be awakened. And I say to all the viewers today, don't end up becoming a lotus eaters. Become an Asra. Become our other dear friend from Somalia, Ayhan Ali Harsi. These voices cannot be shut down. We live in a country. This is the country is not what I came to in 1991. This is what is important for us to bear. Our children's lives are in risk. We do not know what their future is going to be like. This is not the America I have come to. And I think in each one of us, in our own little way, we need to make that beachhead. We need to make that voice heard. Because after all, we are in a free country. Maybe Matt Taibbi will get an IRS visit. These are dangerous signs for this country. Right. Not okay. This is not kosher. This is what is important for us. So, Asra, thank you very much for being here. To all the viewers, please like, subscribe, support, press the bell icon so that when the show comes in, you get intimated about that. And thank you very much. Keep up the good fight, and you are not alone. That's all I wanted you to know. Thank you.
Thank you.